Okay, well, welcome to the April 2022 installment of the CCH2 Data Portal Lunch Break. Today, we're going to be talking about Herbarium Digitization and Data Portal resources. So this is how you can get information about digitization of an herbarium. So that is like starting a new collection or just working with your existing collection. And then also where you can get information about using the CCH2 and other data portals. So this is CCH2 focused. And we'll talk about some recent developments in how these resources are made available and where you can find them. Okay, so the topics of today are we're going to talk about digitization resources. I'm also going to briefly touch on some educational resources that we have available to the Consortium of California Herbaria community as well. And then I'm going to talk about data portal resources, so things that will help you use the CCH2 and other data portals. All right, so for digitization and curation resources, and remember all of these links are available on the shared slides document, and I will go ahead and share that link in right now so that you can follow along if you want. I'm putting that in the chat right now, and that link can also be found on our website, and the website is where I'm going to be leading you to today. So here is the Capturing California's Flowers website, and this is where our first few digitization resources are found. So if you go to the Capturing California's Flowers website, you can find one whole menu called Resources. And if you're first starting out with digitization, or if you're trying to figure out what the workflow would look like for your collection, then you'll want to go into Workflow and Protocols. This is also a great place to look for a specific step in a workflow if you're trying to figure out, okay, now I have the images, what do I do with them, or something like that. And you can find this little diagram here that is showing you at least the Consortium of California Herbaria, or rather the California Phenology Network's workflow. This was developed in 2018 from the California Phenology Network Thematic Collections Network, which was an NSF-funded grant. And then for each of these steps in this workflow, you can find a related protocol down in this list. So you can click on one of these and download them as needed. There's some embedded videos as well. They're a little bit old at this point, but can still get the point across. And so that's where you can find some really good resources. And we've also linked resources from other networks that have done digitization on this page as well. So you can find that information there. You can also find all of these protocols and more if you go back up into resources and go to the document library. And this one is a little bit harder to find things, but you can usually kind of do like a control find and you're like, well, how do I transcribe? And so you can find, oh, here's the label transcription guide. And here's maybe the imaging guide. There's imaging and barcoding. There's a flow chart, processing, things like that. A couple of other interesting things that might be useful to you are protocols for publishing to GBIF. The overall workflow diagram is here. And then there's a full digitization manual, which is basically the download of the whole thing that the California Phenology Network has been doing, including the equipment recommendations and everything. Pretty much everything that you find in the digitization manual, you can find somewhere on the website, such as the equipment recommendations right here. So there's like the imaging and the image processing equipment recommendations, as well as we're building kind of some other resources for herbaria in general. So speaking of resources for herbaria and digitization in general, you can also look at some of these resources. This is the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections Wiki site. It's still a little bit skeletal, but I do know that the Society of Herbarium Curators is working on putting some more botanically themed information on this page. But there's also the Society of Herbarium Curators website has some information too. Currently a little bit rudimentary, but some good information anyways. And then the Florida Museum and the Appalachian State websites are also pretty good because they have both been involved. Well, Appalachian State was involved with a previous herbarium digitization network. And then the Florida Museum or University of Florida also has some good resources there too. So that's kind of like digitization and curation resources. Then if you want information like for your students or for your digitizers or volunteers, then on our website, you can go to resources, digitization FAQ or help page. And this is a bunch of like, what does TRS mean? Or what does, what are UTMs? So you might find that instead of answering the same email many times of people asking what these things are, if you're working with people who are transcribing, you might just point them to this site and say, hey, see if you can find the information here. Like, what do I do with chromosome counts? And what do I do with locality versus habitat? So there's some really good information here that you can point volunteers and transcribers to so that they can get the answers to their questions before they ask you. There's also a full georeferencing training course on this site. So if you go up to resources, georeferencing, there are a couple of versions. This is how to georeference in CCH2, the data portal. We also have one, how to use the collaborative georeferencing tool, which is kind of an external third-party software. And then we have all the protocols and guides just listed on one page. And then I think there's also, yeah, there's a webinar that you can find a link to on the website. And there are also webinars on the page too, under webinars and on the YouTube channel. Speaking of the channel, that's what I was just going to. There is a California Phenology Network YouTube channel. And if you look at all the videos, especially the old ones, are going to be things like, what is weedic bio? How do you georeference? How do you do data editing? So those could be pretty useful. A little bit old, so you might see some discrepancies, but Symbiota hasn't changed that much. You can probably still get the gist. And then there are some educational resources on the Capturing California's Flowers website as well. So if you go up to education, educational materials, there is a list of exercises and lab projects that have been developed for herbarium digitization or herbarium related education. So that's pretty fun. You can bring those into your botany classroom, or you can create labs based off of them, or you can just, make a workshop or bring some students in to do it without being in a class necessarily. So that can be pretty useful too. This one is not associated with the Consortium of California Herbaria, but it is a pretty good resource. It's called collectionseducation.org, and it has some exercises regarding educational use of specimens as well. All right. So when I'm going to talk about the data portal resources, I wanted to clarify one thing. I'm going to be talking a lot about something called Symbiota. And CCH2 is built on an open source software called Symbiota. And Symbiota, that software is being developed at Arizona State University. So when you hear me say Symbiota, Symbiota Support Hub, that's talking about the software that is supporting CCH2. So things that are developed in the Symbiota code, those are then displayed in CCH2 because it uses that same software. And a lot of the tools developed for Symbiota in general are things that are applicable and useful for CCH2 users because we are using that software. So in 2021, just this last year, the National Science Foundation funded the Symbiota Support Hub, which is part of IDIG-Bio, or Integrated Digitized Bio Collections. And this support hub, Symbiota, has been developed for the past 20 years using like kind of a mosaic of random grants, including the Capturing California's Flowers grant. We got some money to develop tools in Symbiota. But until now, there hasn't been like a central support function or team for the Symbiota code, but now there is. So you can think of Symbiota as a code now supported by an organization, that organization being the Symbiota Support Hub. And so the hub is a resource for all the Symbiota user communities, including CCH2. Incidentally, I, Katie Pearson, have been hired as the data manager for the Symbiota Support Hub. So I'm kind of wearing two hats now, but that's really good news for the Consortium of California Herbaria because you're already familiar with me and you will continue to hear from me if you have any questions about Symbiota or CCH2. So the Symbiota Support Hub consists of 8 team members currently. So as you can see there, I'm the data manager, Jen Yost at the California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, who is also the lead PI on the California Phenology Network grant, is the community lead. And then most of the other staff are at Arizona State University where the code is developed. And so you can see those people here. So one of the great parts of this new development in Symbiota, of the Symbiota Support Hub, is that we have people who are dedicated to developing help resources. And one of the great things that has come out of it is this Symbiota Docs site, which is Symbiota documentation, you might think. And it contains information for users on many scales of Symbiota portals. So that can mean someone who is just coming to CCH2 to look at specimen data, or someone who has been given editor privileges for a collection in CCH2 or a Symbiota portal, or someone like many of you who are administrators or collection managers or curators of certain collections. And so you have a lot of things that you are able to do in a Symbiota portal. So if I go to this site, you can see that exact thing I was showing you. There's a user guide, editor guide, and a collection manager guide. And so if you have questions about things that you see in the administrator control panel or things that would come about from a collection manager perspective, then you can go into here. Lots of really great documentation, information about data cleaning, data publishing, deleting, creating records, user permissions, really good information here. There are embedded videos on some of them as well. And so you can use this resource to get information about using a Symbiota portal. Yes, Don, I will share. I'll go ahead and do that right now. This is a super useful link right there. And it's also a good place where you can send students or volunteers to get training. They can go into the editor guide and you could say, okay, go here and then go to the editing records page. And then they can get familiar with what the editing records page looks like. Or the Symbiota data fields. So what fields exist in Symbiota? Or adding full records or adding skeletal records. And this is an iteratively developed website that is continuing to be managed by the Symbiota Support Hub. So if you have any questions, edits, comments, concerns, suggestions for new pages or videos you'd like to see, that's one of the main prerogatives of the Symbiota Support Hub, is to create documentation that is needed. So please do contact us if you would like any additional information on this page. The Symbiota Support Hub also has a YouTube channel. And that's where some of this is actually where the CCH2 lunch break videos are being archived because they are helpful for the whole Symbiota community. So you can find information about batch georeferencing, uploading data to a Symbiota portal, things like that. One thing that hopefully you all are aware of is that the Symbiotic Support Hub is also having monthly meetings, kind of like the data portal lunch break, but a little bit more in depth. And that's called the Symbiotic Support Group. And I'm going to put this link in the chat as well. The Symbiota support groups meet on the first Monday of every month, and they cover some topic related to a Symbiota portal. So if you find a topic that is interesting to you, for example, crowdsourcing is happening in May, then you might tune in and learn about that use of the portal. And they're not just a time to talk about certain aspects of the portal, they are also a time to get questions, or if someone is having any issues in a portal like CCH2, you can come and ask your questions and we'll be live there, ready to answer your questions, share screen, whatever needs to happen. You can also find recordings of past Symbiota support group meetings right here on that website as well. So if you're interested in how data cleaning works or how to publish from a Symbiota portal, you can find those recordings there too. And then a key part of the Symbiota Support Hub is that there is now a Symbiota portal help desk. So if you email symbiota@asu.edu, it comes to the team and I, and we can help you with whatever problems you have right there through email, or we can schedule a meeting. But we're really here to help you with whatever you need. So data imports, data edits, just random questions, we're there to help. All right, and that's all I had about digitization and data portal resources. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and I can answer any questions that you have.